Well, hey there, it's Jennie Wallach, and I am so grateful that you are back for another episode of Agent Success Secrets. And on this episode, I am excited to talk with my new friend, Ida Fields. Ida and I got to meet because we are both certified guides with Phil Jones and exactly what to say. And so, she's going to have some good insights, and I can't wait to share her with us. So, Ida, please tell everyone who you are and what you do, where you are, all that good stuff.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me. And it was such a privilege to meet you. I don't know, what was it? It was very cold. I remember it was very
Yes.
cold in Hudson back in February. We definitely share a love for Phil Jones and all of his incredible work, those magic words. For me, I'm located in Westchester, New York, and I've had the privilege of being a marketing executive at the Corcoran Group. So, for those of you that know Barbara Corcoran, of course, she founded the company, and we've been having fun ever since. And I've been there for 23 years, and my roles have evolved over the years, but I've always been in a corporate marketing role, though my most recent role wears the hat a little bit more of coach. I pull in a little bit of spirituality, but a lot of what I've done throughout my whole career is just help agents find that unique personal brand expression that's going to be authentic to them, but it's also going to drive their business forward. And there's nothing I love doing more than kind of getting under the hood, understanding kind of what makes them tick, and then kind of saying, all right, just there's ideas that can help kind of trigger something, or sometimes it's more of a business shift. It really all depends. But I have a lot of fun, and I'm very fortunate to sit in the role that I do. I'm also a mom of two beautiful boys, and yeah, they keep me pretty busy.
I would say so for sure. And I love it that you haven't been specifically in the real estate sales role, but how many agents do you think you've probably worked with over these years? A lot.
I mean, honestly, I've worked with thousands of agents, primarily in New York City. So I really have the toughest critics, in terms of the most, highly competitive, top tier, top half 1% production wise. I've done it at different firms, which gives me that unique perspective of having the three big firms that are high end in the city. I've held roles at each of them, though Corcoran is my favorite, and there's nowhere else I'd rather be. So yeah, it just gives me that I've learned everything I know from agents, but I don't have the guts to go and have a commission-based job where I don't know where my paycheck is coming from, but I have a tremendous respect for you guys that do that day in and day out. And I always open every workshop or anything that I put together with your time is literally money. So that anytime we're going to spend together, I promise there's going to be at least one nugget that's going to help you move the needle. So that's always my commitment to my agents, whether it's a one-on-one or it's a workshop that we do.
Well, I mean, with over 2 decades, and I've been in the real estate business for 25 years, so we've seen a lot evolve and change when it comes to marketing. Now we've got social media, now
Mhm.
AI. And so we need you, one that's not just like us, but actually has a brain to have structure and detail and planning. And so as you've been in this business, what have you seen change the most when it comes to the agent themselves, going from really salesperson to professional, and even now this whole personal brand that is what
Sure.
sells our
Well,
business?
look, I'll tell you what hasn't changed first. What
Okay,
hasn't changed is that this is a relationship business built on trust.
that's right.
And it always has been, and it always will be. And AI is not going to replace the trust and the sort of nuanced of trusting a professional to the largest financial asset that you have and that advisory role that comes with it. How that has expressed itself has obviously changed through the years. And, look, I'll say that you guys wear more hats than you've ever worn. And it's always so interesting because it's like you're, one day you're the therapist, and then you also have to be that, media buyer, and then you're that, videographer. And then, of course, you're the designer, and you have to be the mediator between all the professionals that you put together and that negotiator. And, there's just a tremendous number of hats that
Mhm.
you guys wear on a day-to-day basis. But I think the biggest one that I've seen agents have to lean into to be successful, in the current world of real estate is you have to understand social media, how to navigate the putting yourself out there in a way that's going to show your value and that's going to be found. I always say, you can, I talk about three parts of a personal brand. There's story, your story, where you're from, your roots, kind of what makes you you, leading with that story, your origin story, what made you, start in real estate. Then there's standard. Your standard is what you stand for, how you consistently show up, and how you approach that like you would a business, right? With all those check lists and the manuals. And we can talk a little bit more about that if you want. And the third one is look, you can have a really compelling story, you can have a very high standard, but if you don't have a strategy, that's the third one, no one finds you. It's like you're a secret agent. And so the strategy is like that media, the marketing, the messaging, everything you know of as marketing. But I do think that one of the biggest mistakes I see agents make is they focus primarily on strategy and they don't think story or standard. They don't really understand how that is the foundation because once you have that why, right, the what and the how will follow lock and step. So I think that's a big part of how I teach the branding, how we show our agents is to always start with why and to really understand the importance of standard to scale your business. And also to show up consistently in a way that you're going to be noticed and differentiate yourself.
I love those three S's. I love that they make sense and they have good meat to them. But gosh,
Sure.
sometimes real estate agents are just too busy to stop and think about this stuff. So, how do
Oh,
you
yeah.
help coach them through the importance of each piece? And do you have any tips or tools that
Sure.
you have?
Well, look, one, I don't expect them. Look, the biggest, I'll say complaint, right, that I get from real estate agents whenever I do like a workshop or they're like, "Oh my God, Ida, there was so much good stuff, but like I can't, I don't even
Yeah.
know where to start." It's so, and so I expect that to be the feeling at the end. And I always say, look, it is not meant to take you, I work with very seasoned agents. They know what they're doing.
Mhm.
Often the difference, the same way with the Phil Jones work, is it's the difference between understanding how to navigate, those important conversations just a little better with a little bit more curiosity or a little. So the same thing is true with marketing. It's like if I take one idea and I say, you know what, I can see how I love gardening. And why don't I turn that into more of a strategy? Great. You love gardening. So why don't you join the conservancy? Great. Now, why don't you reach out? And so understanding that all roads lead to real estate is usually the biggest shift that every workshop I do,
Yeah.
agents have. And it's not that they don't know that, but I think once they realize, oh, wait a minute, I just need to be a little bit more patient and
Mhm.
a little bit more consistent and trust, right? The process, right? Know that I'm being taught by people like we learn from all our top agents. So it just becomes small micro moves that they then commit to rather than saying they're going to do everything. And then they can always go back and say, all right, now, like you said, how do you coach them, right? So one of the things that I've done, I'm only one person, there are thousands of agents, is I have something I call the agent success group formula. And what that is, it's basically peer-to-peer coaching. And I have it set up as a 1 hour format. The first half hour is what you would traditionally expect for a coaching session with a coach or your peers. It would say, what did I commit to doing? Did I do it? How am I going to adjust it? So there's a whole acronym that we do that sort of gives them those sort of task oriented accountability for that first half hour. We call that the goal setting. Then I have the second half hour called gold setting. Gold
Ah,
setting is that brand standard, that gold standard of business. And what I advise agents to do is to take one touch point. Like I go through and give them a whole thing so they have like a list, but it could be anything. So pick one, Jenny. Pick one part of your business, just anything. It could be Instagram, it could be buyer qualification, it
mhm.
could be whatever it is.
I think yeah, let's talk about something that's a hot topic would be like helping sellers price correctly in
Great.
today's
Okay.
market.
So it could be pricing, sellers like handling the pricing conversations.
Yeah.
Great. So that, let's say, would be the touch point. Again, you're having an accountability group, it's a success group. So I call those touch points. So pretty much if you or I were in a group, I would go back and write everything that I do related to
Mhm.
how I price for, when I work with sellers. Okay, I bring the comps, I might take them out to see some competing properties on the market. I might make sure everyone's in the room, like all those nuanced things that you just do because
Mhm.
you know what you're doing. You do the same thing. Okay, when you do it, you bring in your
Yeah.
mentor because pricing is something that, or you go and get, five different opinions and you go and whatever it is, you use this tool. And then we compare notes in that second half hour. And so what happens is you say, oh my goodness, Jenny, I never knew about that app. That's going to be so helpful to me. And you said, you know what? I never thought about making the appointment towards the end of the day so that they, there's all these like little
Yeah.
hundreds of things. So two things happen. One is we learn from each other. There's going to be some weeks where I learn more from you because you're more social media savvy and I'm a more experienced agent. So you're going to be able to get some negotiating tips. But as long as you've committed, could be a small group. Sometimes it's two, sometimes it's four, sometimes it's eight.
Mhm.
It just depends. And the second thing you get is you create your checklists
Mm.
1 week at a time, not all at once. So then that becomes now, if Jenny, let's say I was hosting an open house for you, you
Yeah.
could look back at week 4 and you have this beautiful list of how you host an open house that you can go on vacation, and I can say,
So
okay,
good.
but Jenny always gives brunch recommendations, and she always sits next to them when they have and so I'm able to execute your brand standard through using this model for peer-to-peer coaching. And the other thing that's great is you're not paying a coach. Though I'm all about paying a coach,
Right.
that we're both big on that. But you can do a lot through creating your own tribe of committed, fellow agents, especially if they're working in different areas. That can help a lot to get their perspectives on that too.
Well, this is just so brilliant in so many areas, but one thing that came to mind is I hear, and you probably do as well, that so many agents struggle with creating systems because they just aren't
Yeah.
slowing down long enough. But this is forcing intentional focus time. And gosh, the collaboration with your co-op agents, I mean, that's just going to deepen relationships to better your business. That's brilliant, Ida. I love
Yeah,
that
and I would just say,
peer-to-peer.
look, the thing I would add to it is that what starts to happen is once you have that right, then you could start to use all the technology,
Yeah.
right, to start to capture and use AI. And so a lot of it is you have this baseline of human to human connection where you're having the conversations and then you're able to sort of understand, okay, now how do I scale and how do I make it do it for me? And how do I create this, Monday system where everyone has access to the same, projects, or there's lots of different ways to obviously leverage technology, but you want to have a foundational why and a foundational tribe that you can go back and forth with a variety of skills to help you.
And I just want to share for those watching and listening in of how could we actually implement this in our own businesses. I just
Yeah.
love getting together at least once a quarter with I do an exclusive top agent mastermind with agents from
Yeah.
different companies. This could be the model is the
Yeah.
let's sit down peer to peer and talk through these different systems. We're a community. You've probably found realtors are mostly a community that we share all of our secrets together because we all
Well,
can.
that's always been my mission is when
Yeah.
I one of the things I do for my job is like interview top agents at the company so they can learn from each other. And I only interview go-givers. And
Yeah.
so there's once in a blue moon there'll be an agent. Again, we have mostly go-givers, but there'll be one that I know isn't quite that. And I'm like, yeah, we don't, we
Yeah.
could hear from you in a different way. But the idea of really understanding this mindset of abundance, that the more you share, the more you give, the more you grow. And I can tell you that more agents that I have worked with that believe that and live by that have gotten to the next level of success than almost any other approach.
That is absolutely a huge part of my life and my mission as well. I love that. Now, something I wanted to dive into though is in changing markets, we've been through a lot of them, you and I, but some haven't. been through all the seasons of ups
Sure.
and downs of real estate. So I'm finding that agents in the last that have been in the business, I don't know, 5 years or less, they maybe didn't get the opportunity to learn the tactics or tools or conversation starters and things that we did earlier on. And so I'm seeing and feeling a little bit of burnout.
Hmm.
I've been there and I've done it, and I totally can sense when I'm feeling it. So I've
Yeah.
got some tools to get myself out of it when needed. But if you're with your agents, you're feeling and sensing their frustration. I tend to think that it has a lot to do that they're probably not doing their business in alignment with what really gives them great joy and their
Yes.
values. And so, are you seeing that as well? And how do you help train and coach them to get back in sync with themselves?
Well, it's such a great question, and you're 100% right. That is absolutely the example is always misalignment
Mm,
every single time.
mm,
And I can tell you that often it can be almost aligned. And almost aligned feels just as bad as really, horribly aligned. And so I can tell you that, there are agents that I've met with that, I remember there was one in particular, she came from the Midwest and she was in New York, being the go-getter New York, assertive agent that she thought she had to be successful. And I sat with her in a session and I heard her and I, listened to all the things she did each day and how structured she was and all this. And she said, and I said, but that's not you. And she said, well, but, and we, we had this breakthrough where she was like, you mean I can be nice and I can talk to people online at Starbucks and I can, and I said, not only can you want to lean into that and build a strategy around it.
yeah.
So I think in note first noticing you're burnt out, right? And we know the feelings, and trust me, your body knows more than your mind. So
Mm,
you can talk yourself out of being burnt out, but you trust when you just can feel that low energy, that lack of motivation, all of that. And then I would suggest doing an audit. So without judgment, to just look at whether you want to look at a 24-hour period, 48 hours, whatever you feel is representative of, okay, this is when I do my showings. It kind of gives you a good picture of what your week is like, what your day to day, and just rate like which activities are giving you energy and which ones are depleting your energy without judgment. It's just, yeah, these calls, I feel so drained. When I am meeting with a client and I feel so uplifted, and usually it's the same activities. It's not that much of a rocket science. So then we look at what's what's draining. We have that list and we say what's draining that is necessary for my business.
right.
Okay, I am not, you told me detail oriented, I am not detail oriented. I have faked it very well and figured out how to compensate. But if those types of tasks are truly draining you and you can kind of isolate and say, hey, my CRM makes me want to jump out the window every day when I have to sit down and whatever, then it just becomes okay, but I need that one. That's really important. So it becomes, you start to kind of figure out, and then you realize, wait a minute, I'm chasing 60% of my day D-list clients that
Mm,
are not aligned with what my future business looks like. And I say this is one of the biggest shifts that I have with agents, and it's very hard for them to let go. Like I worked with an agent recently, and her goal was to go from a rental business to a sales business. And she's a big, business in rental, but it's exhausting.
yeah.
And so our first sort of change was to say, well, wait a minute, it's a different approach. We're going to have to just trust that you can show up in the right rooms in the right way that's going to align with the developer clients you want to work with. And that as a singular focus. And so she had to delegate, she had to find, she had to do some things that felt very uncomfortable, but she was very honest with herself that her goal was she still did this rental business because she wanted to service her clients at the level because of course we don't want to delegate service. And so
Right.
I said, okay, well, that's the issue you need to fix. It's not that you need to do it. You need to find someone that trusts and you need to teach them and train them. And so that you feel comfortable getting a piece of that business. And that might take 6 months. It's like, like you mean it's not like one, two, yeah, you might have a few tries. You might need to do a deal with someone with the goal of knowing you're going to be delegating, 50% of your rental business in the next year. And this is your blueprint. So I hope, I know that was a long-winded
No.
answer, but I think it's like you
Right.
have these audits that are going to show you, and then which ones are aligned with,
Yeah.
your future business and which ones feel a little bit more in the past or shoulds.
I think that was a perfect example, and I hear that on the calls I have with top producing agents as well. We are just so obsessed with what we think is this level of service or the things that we should be doing as a
Yes.
real estate professional. But like you said, if we've got a list and that's not our best use of our time or our energy, who can we help train or leverage or let go of that? That's
And,
just,
and I think another piece of it is managing expectations.
that's right.
I have a lot of successful agents that I work with that have boundaries around their time, and they're very
What?
clear. Yeah, they're very clear about after 9 p.m. you won't, get a call back, but this is, how it works. And if you should, and they set that up from the very beginning. When you go out, you can go out on your own, but just make sure you give this information that you're representing you. And there are ways that they have strategically established that relationship in an advisory role that they don't feel like they have to do everything, and they can create some boundaries. But it takes time, and and you see it more with seasoned agents as they get more comfortable in their skin.
Yeah, it does come with confidence, but it can be learned. And
Oh
so
yeah,
let's just kind of lead into this whole alignment and talk about how you've even grown more aligned with yourself in
sure,
your personal life too, because you are amazing at your career of helping realtors through this world of marketing and branding and all of that. But then Ida is a mom as well. So how has that
sure.
all lined up for you?
Sure. So, look, the first, I will say, because I've been doing this for almost over 25 years, really. But the first 10 really were a very high pressure, big team, advertising director roles. Like the first 12 years, the first 10 at Corcoran, and there were a few at other companies. And that was great. It established the credibility. And then we had like, I realized that, hey, I wasn't lit up quite, or my needs changed, my pace changed. And it's hard to kind of admit that once you have kids and so it became, all right, I want to do what I love doing the most, which is this marketing consulting with agents. But it was the thing that I was like, yeah, but are really going to pay me to do just this part of my job? And the truth is, all I had to do was ask and pitch it. And it was an amazing conversation with both my mentor, CMO, and the CEO. They were like, oh, yeah, we agree. What do you need? And then I was all of a sudden like, oh my God, did I just like become an accidental coach? And the truth is, I did. And so then I just said, I'm just going to keep showing up as long as people find value and they show up. And so it was really just doing it without I not knowing really what it was, but just knowing that it lit me up, and then knowing I was going to lean into it. And it ultimately became something that is a lot more flexible in that I can do it from home. It has helped that we have also franchised so that we have agents from across the globe and across the country. So most is done virtually, just screen to screen. And so a lot of that has helped to be able to pivot in that way. But it's also, there's no coaching emergencies where I have to drop everything but there are, marketing and deadline and all the sort of projects and events, that are a lot more high pressure. So being able to just again pivot it to what's going to work for my life, be able to be more flexible. I also have a disabled autistic son, and so that has changed me from the inside out in ways,
Yeah.
that I cannot even explain, but it has given me a very different perspective of what's important, how I spend my time. And I've also been very, honest with others and with myself about sort of it's hard to not say what I used to be able to do and now what I can do. But I also realize wisdom has a lot to do with it, and what I can do in a shorter amount of time over someone else. There's tremendous value there in the experience and the wisdom of that. So lots of pivots, but really to give more flexibility and a more at-home environment for the work, which works really well for me.
Well, let's just sit there for a second because
Yeah.
that is really what you're passionate about now
Oh,
is
yeah.
finding this connection between your son and communication, really.
Yes.
Can you
Yes.
touch on that briefly?
Sure, definitely. So my son has autism, but in the last year, we have discovered that that was, one of the diagnoses, but the primary one is something called Phelan-McDermott syndrome, and it's a genetic mutation that has a lot of regression associated with it, but he's lost his language. And, I've watched my beautiful boy become less independent over the years. And you can only imagine as a mom, how heartbreaking and what that is to carry. But he is my greatest teacher, and I have learned different ways to communicate with him beyond words. And there's a lot too that I have some podcasts that maybe I'll
Oh,
share with you
yes.
that you can share with your audience if they're
Yeah.
curious. And it really goes into suspend your belief. It's a little bit out there, but it's a combination of understanding that I truly believe that him and others like him are actually more highly evolved and that they actually have outgrown their bodies spiritually. It's called body dysmorphia. There's a lot of different dyslexia. There's of course there's a bunch of different terms for it. I don't like to get caught up in the terms, but it basically has to do with whether they call it sensory processing or there's dyspraxia is another term for it. There's lots of different where basically just doesn't connect. And so for a lot, it just looks like, hey, they've got nothing to say. And we're starting to see a whole new movement with new ways to communicate, which is controversial. There was just an article in the Times last week, in the Sunday Times, on spelling and assistive communication. And it has to do with a whole different world. And if you really dive into it, telepathy tapes is a whole other layer of it where there's a telepathic piece of it. And as you can kind of hear as I'm jumping around, I have spent the last few years really just diving in and really feeling lit up and called to have that advocacy and that to be able to speak this truth, knowing that it's disruptive and not everyone is going to kind of stand behind it, but feeling very much in my core that, and it's a combination of what I've always believed. Intuitive coaching has always been a lot of it has come from a spiritual place, but through my son's eyes, I've had this whole other world open to me. And so the first of the year, I posted something I call the AI quantum shift on my LinkedIn. And that was really my first sort of like entry to say, okay, I'm going to share it with the world, however crazy, however all over the place, but felt very called to that if I didn't, that I would just drown in a hole of just keeping that truth to myself.
Yeah.
So it's very different. You don't expect to hear it in a corporate world. I know we just did it to the guides a few weeks ago, and that was very rewarding. I called it the coherence advantage. And it's really about alignment, what you talk about. It's about when the energy aligns, everything follows, and it's all vibration, and there's a tremendous scientific piece behind it. But it is very much what I have come to understand as this next chapter for me as I turn 50 this year. I feel like there's going to be a 50 is fabulous and
Right.
it's going to go in a whole new direction. And I don't know what that's going to be, but I'm pleased that you even asked about it because that just shows that it's starting to gain traction and people are starting to kind of know me for this,
Yeah.
this ideology.
And I may not totally, obviously, I do not understand it fully, but even just learning from you the little bits that I have, I think the reminder for me is just to be open
Oh,
to understand. And then also, I think you even threw out some little questions when we were together of, have you just felt that hunch or that like,
yeah.
like this doesn't feel right? Well, that's intuition.
Oh yeah, it's a big one. And I say like I think I said in our sessions, like it's like just don't poo-poo the woo-woo.
Yeah.
right? Like, just give it. I think we often just throw it out. We say, "Oh no, that doesn't make sense
Too
with what I," so I'm just
weird. Yeah.
throwing it all out. And so if you stay a little bit more curious, right, as Phil Jones says, you ask a few more questions, and then you sort of say, "There's this muscle, this intuitive muscle, this alignment barometer that has always been within me that I haven't quite cultivated or developed." And so that, before I even knew what this was, I've always been this way. When I would do, a workshop, one of the workshops I do with agents is on storytelling and really understanding how your story and how it lights up 9 areas of your brain, and to understand how to evoke emotion through story. And so I would have this list of words, and it would have all of the senses, so sight, sounds, and it would just give you lots of descriptive words to just give you thought starters, to say it was a rainy Wednesday when the buyer opens the bronze door and I noticed the tear on it, like you just kind of get all those words. And it wasn't just five senses, it was always six sense. And the sixth sense was always hunch, intuition, all of those sort of words that we trust our gut for, and to really have that be very real. Just because we can't measure it, doesn't mean it's not there. And I think we've all had
Yeah.
experiences where everything has aligned, and you know that it's when you are in the vibration of your
Mhm.
best self. Every time you're gonna, the light screen and the call comes in, and all of
Yeah.
that tends to happen. And then something will happen that you think, oh my goodness, why did X, the deal fell through, and that's hard. And then you realize that was actually for the best now that I look back, because my client actually got the house that they never could have even imagined, that was the live work, and I would have even never suggested it, but somehow it all fell together. So I think if
Yeah.
you take a step enough back and you take a daily practice of connecting to that intuitive
Mm.
intelligence that is so clear once you start to really listen to it, it will direct you in ways you cannot even imagine, in your business, in your life, in ways that are going to be bigger than you can even imagine. Again, but you got to let go of, I know exactly how this is going to pan out, or this is
Yeah.
what success looks like. I think it's just more, you have to know what it feels like.
Uh,
And once you trust that, yeah, it feels kind of, there's a pep in my step. It feels like I kind of have a little sort of giggle like happening, or, and then you just trust that feeling, and you chase that feeling in ways that are going to empower your life.
I think that is a beautiful place for us to wrap up. I feel like I really enjoy talking with you and learning from you. This was such an amazing conversation, Ida. Thank you so much for all your time. I appreciate you so
Oh,
much.
thank you, Jenny, and thank you for all the work that you do. There is nothing more important than helping women align and know that it's going to look different at different phases of their life. So I'm
Right.
so proud to have you in my tribe. And be well, everyone. Thanks for having me.
You got it. And we will definitely share your LinkedIn. And I know you had a podcast as well. I think what you are
Yep.
doing on that front is super powerful. Thank you, Ida. I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.